Hey guys, and welcome to Tuesday Night Hype number 43, brought to you by Vicious Syndicate. I'm Mastrogation, and alongside me is Blitzcrank Black. What's up, Blitzcrank?
Pretty good, pretty good. How are you, Astrogation?
I'm doing great. I actually drove up for NA Regionals. I just got back. I met Nias there. I met Purple, Jab, Hot Farm, the qualifiers. I had a blast. It was really cool meeting everyone, and now I'm back home, and I'm excited to be back on the Tuesday Night Hype team. So I see you got some Tempo Storm swag going on there. Damn.
Yeah, I ride for Tempo Storm, for those of you who don't know, in addition to ESL and sometimes also Vicious Syndicate. And Reynad gave this jersey back to me during the ESL Legendary Season 2 finals. Yeah, I met him and Frodan and Hype. I met Beast Mode over there too.
Ooh.
Tons of cool people.
Cool.
Great.
I went to Season 1, but I unfortunately wasn't able to go to Season 2. But I wish I would have. I would have met you there too. That would have been cool. So today we're gonna kick off the Tuesday Night Hype show with a show match actually between Nias, one of the qualifiers for BlizzCon, and Ray C, a team member of Vicious Syndicate. Ray C has been basically dominating. Well, not dominate. He hasn't won, but he's gotten like top 4 like a lot of times in Tuesday Night Hype. But he's a fantastic player, and we're gonna have a show match between him and Nias today.
Wasn't he also top 50 in ladder rankings last season?
Yeah, he was. He is consistently very high placing in the ladder rankings as well. Does well in all the open tournaments he plays in. So it should be a very fun, interesting matchup. They've already sent me their class lists, and we'll be jumping into the game really shortly. Anything new with you?
Nope, nothing new with me. Anyways, before we get into the match, let's talk a little bit about the classes that Nias and Racy have chosen. It's like Nias has picked up Warlock, Hunter, and Mage, and Racy has used Mage, Warrior, and Druid. I'm assuming the Warrior is Patron, which I'm pretty sure most of you know by now. It's on its deathbed.
It is kind of on its deathbed, yeah.
And next week, the Warsong Commander, the Warsong Commander nerf is set to go live, and that is changing Warsong from giving all your minions with rear less attack charge to giving all your charged minions +1 attack. This essentially kills the deck because it relies on the charge synergy with Grim Patron and Frozen Berserkers to either flood your board with patrons or to do huge burst turns with double Frozen Berserker, the one turn kill that deck is infamous for. And Warlocks generally they've tended to be the sort of demon handlock instead of Zoo, because Patron is such a hard counter to Zoo.
Actually, okay, we're jumping into the game right now. So Racy is not on Patron Warrior, and actually not too surprising either. Racy is actually originally he was a Control Warrior main. He's been playing a lot of Patron recently, but he has been known as a Control Warrior main prior to Patron being a thing. So looks like he's deciding to bring it back.
That's a very interesting tech to on this deck. Normally you don't really see that card in Warrior because for like for example versus Hunter, you can abuse the sort of freezing traps with say for example Shield Bearers or Cruel Taskmasters, or versus Secret Paladin because on Mystic isn't that great, and versus say for example Tempo Mage, you can you know, drop a sort of cool Taskmaster or Armor Smith into the mirror entity. But and Freeze Mage is such a favorable matchup that you shouldn't even be thinking of running Kazan for that. But it's very interesting that he teched in a Kazan in his Warrior deck. You might see, I mean, Temple Mage is a sort of, has a favorable matchup versus Warrior, but Kazan isn't a tech card I would run. I'd run, say, for example, like a second Brawl or perhaps a Mind Control tech over a Kazan. But that is a very, very interesting addition.
Right, and he is going to get some immediate value off of it, though. Wow. Just steals the mirror entity right out of the... Actually... I suppose he is trying to tech against, there's actually been a lot of mid-range hunters as well. So, basically snagging up the freezing traps and mirror entities, which can hurt the control warrior quite a bit.
I'm assuming Racy has done some homework on nias, you know, or just homework on the meta. Found out that a lot of people like running Temple Mage. You know, the ever-popular Casino Mage
right.
is tearing up ladder. And that, you know, some people choose to run secrets with that. Some people choose to instead run things like unstable portal instead of scientists and secrets. Focus more on the sort of spell synergy. But it's a very hit-terms sort of tech card. But if it hits, then sometimes it's a very big hit. Speaking of big hit, though. We see Racy putting that Death Spike to take that 4 damage of blowback and killing that Mana Worm. He has a very late game oriented hand with, you know, the True Heart, Alexstrasza, the Grom, Shield Maiden. While nias's hand doesn't really look that great. You know, Flame Strike isn't that great versus Control Warrior. Most of the time, you're only going to get it offered on 2 or 3 minions. Most of the minions that Control Warrior has don't even die to a single Flame Strike. And Antonidas in your hand without a bunch of sort of spare parts or other cheap spells to back them up is also, you know, he essentially becomes a 7-mana 5/7. Racy probably assumes that this secret is a second mirror entity. I know some Temple Mages have been running Effigy.
Right, and Counterspell as well.
Counterspell. Those are sort of the standard Temple Mage triad secrets. But you see here that it is mirror entity. And Racy chooses to play around it by playing that cruel Taskmaster to get rid of that mirror entity and only spawn a 2/2 instead of say that shield, giving a shield maiden or just a True Heart.
Right. I think the next couple turns for Racy are going to be a little bit awkward here. I mean, he's basically really low on health, and I guess he's forced to play a Shield Maiden here.
Yeah, you're probably. Are you dead to Fireball anyway? You play the Shield Maiden.
Shouldn't
so
be.
5.
Not to a single Fireball.
Well, yeah, not to a single Fireball, but we see the Dr. Boom coming down, which is probably going to lead to a sort of instant brawl, in my opinion. Choose to go face. Yeah. So there were 2 lines of play. You'd either sort of get rid of the Mana Worm, you trade with the Shield Maiden, or you'd go face. This line of play is not trading with an enemy minion, sort of maximizes the chances of Boom not surviving, but sort of trading with the Mana Worm there would have sort of increased the chances for Shield Maiden to survive, but also would have increased the chance for Boom to survive. So he sort of made the trade-off saying, well, I'd rather Boom not survive than Shield Maiden survive.
Fair enough. Guess he has to use Grom for removal here.
He can use Grom for removal. He can also Alex himself. Is also a possibility.
Problem with Alexing yourself is that it doesn't really mitigate damage. I think
leave an 8/8 on the board.
That's true, but then he just like keeps hitting you again. Whereas if you use Grommash as removal first, then when you Alex yourself next turn, it's more meaningful. Even though it's going to be off curve, like you end up getting a little bit more value this way.
That's true. That's true. Control Warrior has a sort of problem with initiative on the board, since most of the cards are either reactive or they're weapon based. Especially once you are low on life, it's sort of difficult to come back because a lot of your comeback mechanics rely on you sacrificing health. But I want to speak about Toshi. Toshi is one of my favorite legendaries from the DVD expansion,
Oh,
especially
really?
especially to run in Mage. Like most people consider him as a sort of a unique Boulder Fist Ogre, but spare parts offer so much utility. You know, in that, for example, how many times have you lost the game towards because of that one stealth spare part or that freezing spare part that nullified you from trading into the opponent's minions and it can keep on going face? Or I used to run this before Patron got so big. I used to have this sort of control echo deck that I'd run with Toshli and Healbots and a few other Battlecry minions, and it was just fun, getting that time rewind or spare part. Like within the deck, since I also ran Antonidas, I'd have so much value. No matter what spare part I get, I'd always get it. Here we see
Welcome to the Grand Tournament.
see where the armor up just the card tank up. That's an instant 6 life gain, and then adding in that 6/3 onto the board. But yeah, just a card. TGT was rather not that impactful on the meta, except for control decks. Like control decks with the arrival of Justicar and mainly Control Warrior and sort of mid-range and Control Paladin, they sort of got the cards, to sort of extend the length of the games. Like Murloc Knight allowed mid-range and Control Paladin to sort of grind out the opponent more. Sarad, you've been seeing Sarad in more control-ish types decks, like sort of Grinder or Fatigue Warrior has been running Sarad. But outside of that, it hasn't really made the impact that GVG or Naxxramas did on the meta. But with Patron gone, who knows what will happen.
Well played.
Well, I think you kind of forgot to mention one important card, and that being the Mysterious Challenger.
Oh. Yeah, that deck. Yeah, Secret Paladin, everybody's new favorite Christmas present that came early, is brought to you solely in part by Mysterious Challenger. That card, most people thought that Mysterious Challenger would be bad because Paladin secrets are generally really bad, but Mysterious Challenger turned out to be so good that it made the Paladin secrets good. Which is kind of funny, but not at the same time, because it's kind of an annoying deck to play against. But
Looks like Nias got disconnected from Battle.net, so give him a minute to reconnect and re-challenge Racy. It looks like they're already back in preparations.
Alright. Well, Nias beat Racy. Nias' Temple Mage beat Racy's Control Warrior game 1. Temple Mage generally has a favorable matchup versus Control Warrior, since Ray didn't get the Fiery War Axe. That matchup totally depends on whether the Control Warrior gets the Fiery War Axe or not. If the Temple Mage is allowed to develop, say, Mana Worms and Scientists, that allows the Temple Mage player to keep the Control Warrior armor down. And,
Right.
if you're applying pressure, you can't drop things such as just a card, because then they just die immediately towards the Mad Scientist and a Ping. And they can set up Mirror Entity, so you can't drop Belcher, or you give them a Belcher, or you can't drop Shield Maiden, because then they get a 5/5. And then, what's the use of gaining 6 armor if you're going to lose 5 armor if you're going to lose 5 of the speed? And then he also had 2 Brawls in hand. And his hand was just very bunch of 4 draws.
Yeah, and like you said, if the Tempo Mage does get a really good start, then they're usually favored against Control Warrior as well.
And then at the end, he had the Antonidas in hand with the Toshli, which gave him a spare part, and he also had an Arcane Missiles in hand, and I think he also had the Frostbolt. He got 2 Fireballs off of that, And at that point, there was nothing Racy could have done to sort of mitigate that damage, even if he found a way to clear off that entire board, which he really could do. Now we see Tempo Mage versus, I want to say, Hybrid Hunter. Before he mulliganed away the Arcane, or before Nias completed his mulligan, we saw an Arcane Golem in his hand. But he mulliganed.
Right, we did see that. So, with Abusive Sergeants, yeah, it gives us the clues that it's definitely hybrid rather than... Well, with the Shredders, yeah, it doesn't seem to be pure face, so yeah, hybrid is probably what it is. Which is different than what he brought to NA Regionals. He actually brought, I think, a mid-range hunter to NA Regionals.
Yeah, I think it was, his lineup was... I think he also ran... I think his total list that he ran were like Dragon Priest and Tempo Mage and Demon Handlock. I think at Regionals he's subbed in a mid-range hunter to sort of counter out the... He was expecting there to be Handlock. Many Handlocks in the Regionals, and well, mid-range hunter is really good against Handlock. Probably... it feels weird, but last turn I would have sort of coined out at the 2-1 instead of playing out the mirror images. Probably setting them, for example, if you draw a Sorcerer's Apprentice or a Flame Waker. Because currently the mirror images is essentially a flash heal.
Right.
1 mana gain for life. Oh. There's that Sorcerer's Apprentice. Well, we're probably gonna see Sorcerer's Apprentice into
Someday I'll be just like you.
Frostbolt. Interesting. The question is, will he... Now, he wouldn't point out the Unstable Portal at this stage in the game. You're probably gonna save the portal for... Or, excuse me, the coin for Dr. Boom. Because what's better than a turn 7 Dr. Boom? A turn 6 Dr. Boom.
Right, he's gonna be able to Unstable Portal here, buff up his Mana Worm, get a card from the Unstable Portal. Leper Gnome.
Hunter meets Hunter. Now, with dropping the Leper Gnome here, play into any sort of cards, he might want to attack first to see if it's Explosive Trap. But with the Shredder, to drop the Shredder, there can only really be 2 traps that Hybrid Hunters run, either Freezing or Snakes.
Right.
And it's like Freezing.
Also, I guess that play wasn't too weak to... Actually, it would have been better if he tested it on the Shredder. Like, instead of attacking face, he attacked Shredder. But I guess he's not too prepared for snakes. Yeah.
You didn't have a way to deal with snakes. And Bear Trap, which is a trap that you only really see in the sort of mid-range hunter or beast hunter. He had a way to sort of deal with it.
Ooh, he's gonna have 2 chances to juggle down the Leper Gnome. And he misses both of them.
Pretty bad.
Wow. How great would it be for Racy if he could coin out the Flame Strike right now?
That would have been pretty great. Yeah, another sort of option last turn was just not to attack at all. But coming up on turn 5, turn 5 is sort of, you know, bow plus trap turn or bow plus 2 mana drop turn. And you kind of don't want to sort of play into that. Because as Temple Mage, a lot of your minions, you know, Scientist or Sorcerer's Apprentice or Mana Worm, they're really sort of weak towards the Eaglehorn Bow. It gets a lot of value versus Temple Mage. And for example, you know, versus your Mirror Entity, they can drop like an Abusive, or they can drop a Knife Juggler, and then they can trade into it with the bow, thus rendering your Mirror Entity ineffective. So I just kind of wanted to play around bow. Baron Nias here, I'd probably silence. You could silence in kill command, or silence Arcane Golem go face.
Right. It's not. It's not a great idea to play the high main into that.
Yeah, since the Sylvanus will just get a clean trade off and then take one of your 3-2 or your 4-2.
Now.
Since Death Rattle is activated in the order they're played, so Sylvanus Death Rattle would activate first, then the high main Death Rattle would activate. Right now, Nias is debating whether or not to keep the kill command to aim at base, or to just Hero Power or the Arcane Golem. Dropping the Arcane Golem would have put Racy down to 11. And he might have been able to Flame Strike this turn if he did play the Arcane Golem, but, which is a real possibility once you see the Sylvanus out.
Right, I don't blame him at all for just weaving in the hero power there, because I think he wants us be in a situation where he just hero powers every turn. The high main's probably never going to come down, so it's going to be like Arcane Golem hero power and then kill command to finish it off if it's still not enough.
Yeah, the Hunter hero power is probably one of the best late game hero power versus classes that don't really have any natural healing, such as Mage. At the end, near the end of the game, you're starting to chunk out, players for, 20%, 25% of their health every turn. Just a really sort of powerful scaling power. Probably one of the strongest in the game.
Right.
As we see him chunking Racy down to 4 HP. Yeah, at this point it's
Well played.
base is the place.
Well played.
He's going to ping his own face. Feels bad, man.
Yep. He can't even kill himself. That is... And you can't even Sudoku. That's the worst feeling in the world. Well, looks like Nias is taking it 2-0 over Racy.
Yeah, those were some dominating games for sure, and, well...
Nias has been very fortunate in sort of setting up his lineup and the decks that he plays, sort of counter what Racy is playing. Like, a sort of slower tempo mage like that, the mid-range mage, sort of die very quickly to face hunter and hybrid hunter, especially if you don't get your flame wakers.
Right. So, Nias has basically just his warlock left, and I'm hoping we get to see like some of the refreshment vendor business going on in this deck.
Ooh, refreshment vendor. I remember Nias was that's the deck you use at regional, right?
Right.
Refreshment vendor handlock.
Yep, looks like it's handlock.
I must protect the wild.
This is the fabled refreshment vendor handlock, and it looks like with the Ancient of War, I want to say it's sort of a slower druid, but how slow it can be is very up for debate. Back
Right.
during the sort of when Patron was king, a lot of combo druids ran 1 or 2 Ancient of Wars to sort of counter out the Patron menace. Since, for example, they used their executes on a Druid of the Claw or an innervated out Emperor Thorson, leaving your giant 5/10
Guide my lands.
Ancient of War to be unable to be dealt with.
So Racy pretty much knew that his opponent's last deck was going to be handlock, so he decides to just take a favorable matchup with Druid. And it looks like it's working out so far. The Darnassus going unanswered, and he just ramps into a Shredder.
Yeah, like Druid, in the sort of pre-DVD days, handlock used to be extremely favored versus Druid.
Whoa!
Oh, that is quite a drop from Shredder.
Yeah, the Hellfire just... I mean, you'd like it to do a lot more than that. Like, ideally, the Shredder drops something that doesn't attack, but this is just... It gets 2 attacks. Feels bad, man.
Yeah, 2 or 3 attack minion. He wasn't expecting to take that much damage, but looks like he took a lot of damage. Oh, and he's tapping too. I'm not really sure what Nias is tapping for. Maybe heal. Oh, that innovate is such a big pickup for Racy. Now, I'd probably just drop the innovate into the lore.
Yeah, try to find the
Face.
combo pieces.
Yeah, you already have a sort of Keeper of the Grove in hand for one taunt. I mean, with the tap last turn, that could be Nias bluffing that he has double Moltons in hand. But from what we know, Nias doesn't really have double Moltons in hand. He does have double Sun Fury, but he doesn't really have a sort of... He has a... Is that a Belcher? That is a Belcher. He has a Belcher, two Belchers, but no sort of heal bots or any other heal in his hand. And there's a Wrath, and Wild Growth isn't particularly the best card. But I'd really like to see Racy just not suspect the Moltons and go face, since he does have that Keeper of the Grove in hand.
So yeah, he didn't really find, like, he ideally would have liked to find a Savage Roar there, but it doesn't seem like he's gonna be able to finish off Nias anytime soon. Nias looks like he's got two Belchers, so he's like ready to just like wall up for the next couple turns.
Yeah, that's the issue with the modern Handlock versus Druid matchup. Because you're always worried of combo, since most Druids run 2 copies of the combo nowadays. Later on in the game, it just forces you to play very reactively, which you kind of don't really want to do. Because if you're forced to play defensive, you're going to be making subpar plays, you know, taunting up Ancient Watchers instead of developing like Giant or Dr. Boom. And so we're going to see the Dark Bomb and the Mountain Giant come down. Does Racy run any big game hunters in his game? Oh my god, that is so big. Just the second Ancient of Lord. When you're a Druid, all you want to do is draw.
Right.
Just draw for answers, draw for removal, draw. The entire point of the deck is to draw until you reach your combo and then combo for the win. Since you have double Keeper of the Grove in hand, I'd say just go face.
Really? I think trading is actually not too terrible, because you saw a Hellfire get used, so the Sport isn't too weak to AoE.
You also saw a Dark Bomb get used to, but Shadow Flame. Like, I always try to play around Shadow Flame.
Right. Well, in this scenario though, Racy actually just wins here. Like, I don't know if going phase was correct, because like playing around Moltons is also, you know, a consideration. Yeah, it looks like Nias is only gonna just have a Belcher here. It's gonna get silenced, and then Racy's just gonna push 13 to the face.
And that is lethal. Silencing the Belcher and the dough.
I mean, you do make a good point about playing around Shadow Flame, but if he drops both Moltons, Shadow Flame's one of them, taunts the other one, like, you're still in an equally terrible position, so...
Yeah. There's also a question around playing around the second Hellfire, because tap second Hellfire would have allowed him to play Moltons for free, but I don't think he would have been able to taunt them up at the same time. Since current Handlock, the current Handlock archetype runs 2 Hellfires, 1 Shadow Flame. They either run 1 or 2 Dark Bombs. It depends on basically player preference.
I've seen most lists run 2 Dark Bombs. There is some variance between like 1 or 2 Hellfires though. I do see a lot of lists, they only run 1 of each AoE.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's a more recent development due to players stopping playing Patron. You don't need that much AoE anymore.
Ooh, yeah, so it looks like Nias, look, he does have the refreshment vendors.
Ah, finally.
Sick.
You get to have some funnel cakes.
Oh man, I've been waiting all day for the funnel cakes.
OP.
Alright, so Racy's on his mage now, back on his tempo mage that failed to secure a win against the Hybrid Hunter earlier. This should be a little bit of a better matchup. I typically like tempo mage versus Handlock.
Some players say that the Handlock is favored, while some players argue that the tempo mage is favored. Honestly, I think this is a very draw-dependent matchup.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you get your fireballs as a tempo mage, well, you're able to power-on aggression like what Ray C is doing right now, then it's a very difficult match for the handlock. Generally because, you know, the handlock's AoE is stuff like Hellfire or Shadow Flame, which either requires something to stay on the board, or, you know, it brings you down further into the range of, you know, the damage reach.
Yeah, looks like Racy's got a pretty decent start here. Nias, the last turn wasn't particularly strong. He just plays an owl to silence the Mana Worm, but the Mana Worm's still going to be able to just trade for the owl, and then, yeah, Racy's just going to keep pressuring. Looks like he's going to play Mirror Entity here into the turn 4, which is usually very smart versus the handlock.
Handlocks, most of their turn 4 either consist of either Twilight Drakes or Mountain Giants or Void Callers. And those are all things you don't really want to be duplicating or giving your opponent a copy of.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Counterspell, if it was Counterspell, would have also been a very good secret to play there, because it nullifies the Hellfire, which would have destroyed this board.
Right.
Get behind me.
Booty Bay Bodyguard gonna come down for a discounted price of 2 mana. Feels kind of good, man, because I don't know, it feels really bad playing it for 5 mana because it's not very good stats.
It's not that great of a card at 5 mana. Like currently we see the new TGT card, Evil Heckler.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the same as Booty Bay Bodyguard, but for 4 mana. So for 5 mana, it's definitely not that.
Whoa,
great.
Hold on a second. There's no way he has lethal here with the Beltra, but I was trying to figure out, like, he looks like he's gonna Flame Cannon and ping it. Alright, yeah. That makes sense.
Flame Cannon ping. Probably trade the, yeah, the Southeast deckhand. Or,
Wow, just going all face here, knowing that basically, unless his opponent heal bots. Actually, Refreshment Vendor doesn't do much. Alright, Ray C on the Tempo Mage ties up the series. So now it's gonna come down to Handlock versus Warrior. Handlock versus Control Warrior. Oh, the one of the classic matchups.
Oh yeah. Both of these decks have been in the game since beta, and ever since the beginning of Hearthstone history, Handlock has always been favored over Control Warrior. It's generally due to the fact that the Warlock hero power, you know, just drawing cards, especially in a control mirror, having more sort of resources in hand than your opponent is very important. You know, just digging in to play more threats. You know, eventually you're gonna have things like Jiraxis. Things like Void Colors are also annoying to deal with as the warrior, because say you spend your turn clearing the Void Color, can you deal with a sort of Doom Guard or the 315 Jiraxis or even a Mal'Ganis?
Right. They also help resist brawls too. Like later on, when you're afraid of overextending into a brawl, you play the Void Caller, and all of a sudden you're less weak to brawl.
Yep. Because either, you know, one of your other minions survive and then you get a big demon from your hand, or your Void Caller survives and you're pretty sad. Ooh. Now, Iron Beak Owl is probably the most important card in this matchup for the Handlock. Like, nullifying the card draw right there, even though it seems not that big, it probably has given nias the game, essentially, at this point. It's just, when you remove the card draw from the Control Warrior in this matchup, the Handlock is almost an auto-win.
True, although it depends on the Warrior's draw, though, because when you use usually it's like a one-of owl in the handlocks these days, right? If you use the owl on the Acolyte, then the Sylvanas gets more value, and then the Ysera can't get silenced either, and most demon handlocks aren't running Siphon Soul, so if Ray C can go in like Sylvanas into Ysera later, then he does have a chance still, I would say.
That is true. I'm thinking more of the sort of classic handlocks with double watchers and two owls and a siphon soul.
All right. If you have two owls, then silencing an acolyte is pretty slam dunk. But when you have one owl, it's a little. You have to think about it a little more. But it looks like Nias has really good follow up, so I think it's looking pretty good.
Look at his hand. Let's see, his Void Caller is primed to release, a big demon, either Mal'Ganis or Jaraxxus. I think that's a Emperor Tharisen. You have two Hellfires, which aren't really that great in this matchup, but the big game Hunter is pretty good versus Control Warriors. You can deal with Dr. Boom or Alexstrasza or an activated Grommash. You see Racy choosing not to attack into the Void Caller. He might consider attacking into it next turn.
Mm-hmm.
And then trying to steal whatever comes out with Sylvanas.
Right, so having the Sylvanas, basically, you already saw your opponent use an owl. You think your opponent probably doesn't have an owl. And now it's just going to stick, and yeah, Sylvanas being on board in the Brawl next turn is going to be huge.
Yeah, I think the reason why Nias played the owl on the Acolyte is that a lot of Control Warrior players have been removing Sylvanas from their deck. From what I've seen on, for example, Show or other Control Warrior players, they've been removing Sylvanas in case, because the meta was just too fast.
Oh, interesting.
In Control Warrior, and unless you're running Varian, then you don't really have enough time to drop down Sylvanas. Like, getting Sylvanas off of Varian is a really sort of power play, but, just dropping Sylvanas on an empty board while your opponent, dropping Sylvanas on a board where your opponent has board control, they can just ignore it and, apply pressure on your face.
Well, look, so the outcome of the Sylvanas went in the favor of Nias, I would say, because basically just stealing a Void Caller, but as you know, Warrior doesn't have synergy with Demons, so giving a 3/3 up per Sylvanas isn't too terrible.
Yeah, he won the 50-50 coin flip, otherwise he'd have to have used the Hellfire right there, I think. I'm gonna see. I don't really like this Lotheb play right now. Generally, you want to save Lotheb on boards that you're afraid might be vulnerable to Brawl.
Yeah, but what else does he have to play there? So he ends up. I mean, I guess he still has his other Void Caller.
Yeah, second Void Caller and tapping. I guess he doesn't want to risk Jaraxxus coming out, since Jaraxxus is such a good card versus Warriors.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So he's just gonna drop a naked Mal'Ganis out. Now, for those of you who don't know, when it means your hero is immune, it means you can't target your hero with anything. So, you might be thinking, oh, Racy could just attack face with the Death Bite and then just use the Whirlwind effect to execute the Mal'Ganis, but since Nias' Warlock hero was immune, he'd actually have to hit the Mal'Ganis in order to deal with it. And he already saw one shield slam, so he couldn't execute it right there.
One thing I learned too is that Mal'Ganis makes you not take damage from fatigue, and also it makes your hero not targetable by Alexstrasza.
Your hero can't be targeted by anything from the opponent. Like, you can't even use Earthen Ring Farseer or anything like that. Or if your hero is immune. Same thing goes for Alexstrasza. However, you can target yourself with effects if you're under immune, but your opponent can't.
Right, like you can heal bot yourself through it as well.
Yep. So we're gonna see an almost full clear come down from Nias, and then he's dropping down the Belcher. I think that's both Hellfires are gone, which is I think Racy has been keeping track of the cards that Handlock played in terms of card removal. It's been Dark Bomb and 2 Hellfires. It's always, especially in control matchups, you always want to count the cards your opponent has or
Right.
has played.
Very good habit to keep.
Especially since a matchup like this oftentimes will go to fatigue. So you need to know what cards that you have to play against and what cards have already been played. At this point, I think until Jiraxis comes down, Racy is in the upper hand, especially with both brawls.
Yeah, you know, I expected the brawls to do a bit more. I mean, they've kind of just been sitting in the hand. No good opportunities have come about yet. But looks like it's a prime time to drop Jiraxis now. He's gonna be able to make a 6/6 on the same turn as well.
Like, one of the biggest reasons why I'd run Emperor and Havoc outside of the obvious huge hand discounts in it. That allows you to Hero Power and Jiraxis on the same turn, which is... I wouldn't want to say a tempo swing, because it's not really affecting tempo that much, but it's just a huge sort of
Bonus.
resource development.
Right. Well, I mean, he actually saved the coin the whole game. Like, he still has the coin, so even without the discount, he would have been able to coin it out, too. So, I don't know, do you think we ever even get to see the coin being used this game?
I think at this point, if the coin hasn't been used, then it won't really be used at all, unless he wants to sort of put down more than 10 mana in a single turn. However, this is really interesting. Looks like Nias has 2 big game hunters in his handlock list.
Oh
like
yeah,
he's-
I talked to him about that at regionals actually. He cut a watcher for an extra BGH because like the BGH as far as Shadow Flame ability does the same thing. I mean watchers you can taunt it up. There's more flexibility in taunting up the watcher, but like the BGH having the extra BGH to counter other handlocks is actually like really relevant.
Yeah, I think BGH is a more versatile anti-control card. Like you can just drop it down as a standalone body, and then they'll be forced to use removal or other resources into it.
Ooh, it's like using a brawl now, and I think the winning line might possibly be just to hit face with a Death Spite here. Set up for Gromash next turn. Ooh, he's doing it. I like it.
Yeah, this is generally how handlocks, or handlocks lose. This is generally how I've lost to Control Warriors as handlock. You know, I'm Jiraxis. They put me down to 10 HP. I don't have any more taunt givers or healers in my hand, and then I'm forced to just sit there, and then they play Grom and Cruel Taskmaster, and I'm sad.
Yeah, but it looks like in this case, Nias actually does have a Taunt Giver and a Heal Bot, which, I mean, it puts him, like, kind of vulnerable to yet another Brawl, but it's gonna buy him, some time.
It's like this is a very sort of a more control-y take on the standard Control Warrior. We see with the Bashes in Revenge.
Right.
Like, Bash is another one of those cards in TGT that came out to help Control Warrior over, you know, other archetypes of Warrior. And it's just... I was really hyped for the card, although it kind of didn't really live up to the sort of hype, or the hype that I gave it to, but I'm still pretty excited to sort of play with it. And it's a really good defensive card, and even an offensive card too, you know. Like, the biggest problem Control Warriors have is dealing with minions behind taunts, and Bash allows you to sort of get rid of those minions, or, you know, hawk them with executes without having to use, say, for example, a shield slap, or
Ooh, right.
a Taskmaster.
So actually, another thing that Bash allows Control Warrior to do is if you have a weapon up, you can actually clear an entire shredder in a single turn. Like if you just have a weapon, there are a lot of times where you take the shredder damage and it gets like a 3-2, and then the 3-2 hits you again, and then you have to hit the 3-2 with your weapon, and then you end up taking a lot of damage. But with bash, you can like clear it in the same turn sometimes.
Yeah, like you play Fiery War Axe, they play Shredder. Most of the time,
Get your funnel cakes here.
the Shredder drops have less attack than the original Shredder itself, so you bash the Shredder and then you can finish off whatever minion it was with the Fiery War Axe itself. Or, because otherwise, you know, hitting it two times with a weapon is 4 damage from the original Shredder and then 2 to 3 damage from whatever pops out, which is a lot of damage to be taken in.
Yeah, looks like Ray C's not gonna really have any outs to win here, because even with drawing Gromash, as long as Nias keeps clearing his board, like Ray C can only really do 14 from hand.
Does he run any Cruel Taskmasters in his deck?
Yeah, but it would require 2 draws into it.
2 draws. How many draws does Racy have?
Like he would need to draw. I think he would need to draw Runner. Actually, Runner doesn't even work because I think he has. He's just dead next turn. No, he's not. Ooh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, there's the Cruel Task. See, that's 14, 20.
Yeah. So even
That's
like
exact.
yeah, he's just dead. Yeah. So he
Yeah,
didn't
that's
have a chance to
exactly-
draw Runner.
Well then. This is just, I guess, standard how most matches with the Control Warrior versus Handlock end up being. You just end up getting too much value with Jiraxis. You know, summon a 6/6 every single turn. Even with Brawls, 2 Brawls, you can't really deal with that, you know, for an extended period of time. And
All right.
Nias takes match point in a almost reverse swept series with the Demon Handlock.
Right, and like Ray C's other 2 lists were pretty good counters to Demon Handlock, and he was able to take those games. But Control Warrior versus Demon Handlock, I don't know, man. Some people say it's good for Warrior, some people say it's good for Handlock. I've played both, and I think it's slightly better on the Handlock side. But yeah, it looks like.
I think it matters whether you run Harrison Jones or not.
Oh right, for the
For the Jiraxis weapon.
Jiraxis weapon.
Because most of the time, as the Control Warrior, your cards starve.
Right.
You often have 4 to 5 cards in your hand at maximum during the entire game. So if they play Jiraxis and you're able to draw, you know, even 5 cards, 4 cards off of that, they can often fill your hand up with the resources you need to push through for lethal, even in the face of infinite 6/6s.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see any Harrison from Racy. I don't know if he runs it in his deck. If he does, that's very unfortunate that he wasn't able to draw it. He might have been able to draw the Cruel Taskmaster and Drawmash. He was able to draw the Harrison off the Jiraxis weapon. And even then, playing it on its own as a 5/4 body is very awkward for the Handlock to deal with. They
That's
can't
true.
they can't just Dark Bomb it away. They have to Dark Bomb it and Mortal Coil or Shadow Flame or use a Twilight Drake.
Although
But-
one argument you could make against Harrison though is that like it stays as a dead card in your hand until they do play Jiraxis, and I don't know. Sometimes it's very hard to decide like when you want to save it versus when you just want to throw it out there for tempo.
It depends. Like once you go on later on in the game and you're feeling the pressure as the warrior, you know the Handlock, you know, has a 7 to 9 card hand, and you're sitting there with a 3 to 4 card hand. You want to keep it in your hand. You want to keep it there as insurance, so
Right.
they don't play Jiraxis. Because if they play Jiraxis, the sort of resource gain that you get from Harrison would be, you know, can just win you the game. But early on, if you have executes in your hand, if you have a good curve like Boom into sort of Alex Straza with just a car, then you might set up the Harrison out as a 5/4 body just to sort of pressure the hand lock, set up a lethal amount of damage on board with a prepped up Death Bite and a Grommash in hand. It just sort of depends on the situation.
Well, there you have it. Nias takes down Vicious Syndicate's Racy 3-2. That was an exciting series. We're gonna go on a quick intermission. When we come back, we're gonna try to set up an interview with Nias, and we'll also see if we can get Nias to cast the rest of Tuesday Night Hype with us. So stay tuned. We'll be right back in just a couple minutes.